We often hear about the gut microbiome, but did you ever think about the microbiome of the animals that you're ingesting? Well, maybe we need to talk about that because I think that's got some relevance here and is certainly going to make an argument for why pasture raised animals probably are the better choice. Hey guys, Dr. Arland Hill out at Harvest Hills Ranch. And as I was reading through some literature on the gut microbiome as it relates to overgrowth of bacteria in the small intestine, I got to thinking, how does this correlate to what we do out here at the ranch? And it got me on a path to digging into some literature and really putting my head to, what are we doing here at the ranch that's affecting the microbiome of our animals? And where I want to go with this is the microbiome of our chickens. The microbiome in the cows pretty much is controlled by the ruminant. And as long as we keep that ruminant nice and healthy, keep good forage in front of those guys, their microbiome is top notch. Chickens are much more susceptible to change, however, and it gave me this visualization of the difference between pasture-raised broilers, which are meat birds, and the conventional model, which is going to be raised in the long houses that you may have seen if you drive down the road. Oftentimes they're set back off the road, but another point for another day, I suppose. But nonetheless, on that, when you look at those houses and you think about the environment in those, it is not an optimal environment in terms of a microbiome. Let me rephrase that. In terms of a healthy microbiome, it is more of an optimal environment for a dysbiotic microbiome or an unhealthy microbiome. But if you contrast that against the pasture-raised bird, the pasture-raised bird not only, of course, has fresh air and sunlight and all these things, but they are constantly exposed to new microbiota in the soil every day. And the microbiota that is in the plants as they're nibbling at the grass, eating the different bugs that are out there as they're daily moved across the pasture. But then also, once you think about not just directly consuming those microbiota, but just like us, they have needs, their microbiota have needs to be able to proliferate. And how do you facilitate that? Well, let's backtrack to humans for a minute. So in humans, the consumption of things like colorful elements in our diet, what we often talk about is polyphenols, the adequate amounts of fiber in the diet, consuming protein sources that are polyphenol rich, that have a lot of colorful elements to them. Those are the things that support us as humans. So how do we translate that same type of knowledge to the bird? Well, ideally, as they're going across that pasture, they're consuming the grass, right? And the grass is going to have colorful elements in it. It's going to have chlorophyll in there. They're eating at other flowers and other forage that's growing out there that are also going to have an array of different colors. So they're ingesting those polyphenols. And so those, again, become stimulants to the beneficial organisms there. And I want to come back and talk about why that's important, but they become stimulants to those organisms, but they also, all those colorful elements also have antimicrobial activity that are inhibiting those problematic, what we often think about as pathogens, from proliferating in those pasture-raised birds as well. So that's one thing. They get the fiber in there. Just if you ever take a blade of grass and you start to pull it apart, you can actually see in many of them the fiber in there. And they're ingesting that, and that's nourishing to those microbiota. They're proliferating in that chicken's gastrointestinal tract. Now, the reason that this is all important, and the reason that we want these microbiota functioning at such a high level as those animals, as those birds are migrating across that pasture, is that that's going to stimulate their immune system. And it's going to increase production of different micronutrients, B vitamins, vitamin K. Different nutrients are directly produced by the microbiota. And that means that those are being incorporated into the flesh of that animal. So they're being used by the animal to optimize its health. But ultimately, when you as the consumer are ingesting that pasture-raised bird, you're consuming a more nutrient-rich bird because of the effects that they've had on the microbiota. And you're also consuming a bird that has had a healthier immune system, which you don't want to consume meat from sickly animals. You want to consume meat from healthy, vibrant animals. That's what's going to translate to you having a healthy, vibrant life, is when we consume foods that are of that type of profile. So I thought about this and I thought, man, I've just got to share this with you guys, this idea of how important the microbiome is when you look at a pasture raised bird. We talk about how to differentiate between pasture raised and non-pasture raised birds, chickens, if you will. And that is when you pick up a product in the grocery store, like you pick up a packet of chicken in the grocery store, none of what I just said is translated in that label, and that's intentional. They don't want you to think about that stuff, but you need to think about that stuff, because ultimately at the end of the day, if that microbiota in that bird is not healthy, then that food is not going to be at the highest nutritional value that it should be. And if you're not consuming the most nutrient-rich food that you can consume, why are you consuming it? Because you're not supporting and optimizing your health. And that's what this is all about at the end of the day. So hopefully that gives you a different perspective when it comes to pasture-raised chicken and why you're consuming that. And I look forward to bringing you more content and information similar to this topic in the very near future. Till then, guys, we'll talk to you soon.